Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you this evening. Wild swings on Dalal Street. The Sensex declines by nearly 800 points. The Nifty drops 1%. Bank stocks along with oil and gas stocks lead the decline, but mid-caps outperform with the index ending with marginal gains. Moody's, Citi, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley and a few other brokerages hand down sharp cuts to their growth forecast for India. This after the first quarter GDP grew at a slower than expected pace of 13.5%. The government maintains the economy remains on course to achieve 7 to 7.5% growth this year. Crude oil prices fall after fresh concerns over supply and demand slowdown in China. The Indian government hikes the windfall profit tax on crude export of diesel and aviation turbine fuel as well. The government collects 1.43 lakh crore rupees in GST collections for August. The mop-up has stayed above 1.4 lakh crore rupees for the sixth month in a row. Direct tax collections remain robust, with the government on course to beat its budget target. Auto sales in August threw up a mixed bag. Maruti Tata Motors report growth of over 25% due to a low base and some pickup in domestic sales, but exports come under pressure. The chief financial officer of SpiceJet resigns and the airline's first quarter losses rise 60% to nearly 800 crore rupees. The auditor raises the red flag about SpiceJet's ability to continue as a going concern. Potential roadblock for the deal between Sony and Zee Entertainment. Report claims Competition Commission's initial review has said the merger will create a $10 billion TV enterprise, which will have unparalleled bargaining power and can hurt competition. Zee responds saying its market share is down and CCI's questions are procedural. The government's Open Network for Digital Commerce, or ONDC, is in talks with 3 potential investors. The National Payment Corporation has the approval from RBI to pick up almost a 10% stake in ONDC. 2 more investors are likely to join NPCI. The insurance regulator is likely to open up the distribution architecture. Sources say IRDAI is likely to allow individual agents to tie up with more than one insurer. That's an exclusive. The global CEO of Reckitt, Lakshman Narasimhan, will step down at the end of September after a 3-year term. Reckitt says Narasimhan has decided to leave for personal reasons to relocate to the US and has been approached with a new opportunity. Well, let's start with the market action today. A day of volatile times on the Dalal Street as both the Sensex and the Nifty were down about 1%. Weak global cues spoiling the sentiment further, with the Sensex losing 770 points and the Nifty lost about 200 points today. But mid-caps did manage to buck the trend and the mid-cap index ended marginally in the green. Anuj is here to wrap up the market action for us. Anuj, volatile times continue but down in the red, and sharply so, both on the Sensex and the Nifty.
Well, what a volatile day for the market on the weekly options expiry day, and coming a day after a day off. We were reacting to bunched up global cues. The SGX Nifty was down 350 points. We did start lower, not by as much, but still it was a big gap down. Then the Nifty recovered 200 points, fell another 200 points post-noon, and then had another recovery. So really was all over the place. The Bank Nifty, of course, traded in a much bigger band as well. And the mid-cap side of the market, that's been outperforming, and today also for better part of the day, advance decline was in favor of the advances. In terms of individual names, consumption has been doing well. So names like Tata Consumer, Asian Paints, Hero MotoCorp, these stocks did well. And the ones which underperformed today were really all the global plays, commodities. Reliance was down, TCS was down, Hindalco was down, Tech Mahindra and Infosys was also down. As I said, the broader market did well. Some stocks which stood out included names like GMR Infra, Ashok Leyland, Astral, Tata Communications and SRF. All in all, a very volatile day, perhaps a bit of a teaser of what is to come in the months of September and October.
Well, we'll have to wait to see whether the volatility continues with this kind of ferocity and intensity. Anuj, many thanks for joining us. But in the money market, the rupee weakened marginally against the dollar. It lost about 10 paise in trade today as the dollar index strengthened against most currencies. 10-year bond prices also dropping marginally, with the yield remaining above 7%. And oil prices slipping on the back of increased supply and worries that the global economy could slow down further on the back of tougher COVID curbs in several big Chinese cities. Over 20 million people in the city of Chengdu now face a lockdown as the country enforces its zero-COVID policy. Meanwhile, production in both OPEC and the US has risen to its highest level since the early days of the COVID pandemic. The government has hiked the windfall profit tax on crude, the export of diesel and aviation turbine fuel at its fortnightly review. Now, the windfall tax on domestic crude has been raised to 13,300 rupees a tonne from 13,000 earlier. The cess on the export of aviation turbine fuel has been hiked more than threefold from 2 rupees per litre to 9 rupees a litre. The tax imposed on the export of diesel has also nearly been doubled from 7 rupees a litre to just under 14 rupees a litre. So a big jump there coming in as far as the export duty and the windfall tax is concerned. The top story this evening, multiple brokerages have tempered their GDP growth expectations. This after India reported a slower than expected growth rate of 13.5% in the first quarter. But the Union Finance Secretary T.V. Somanathan remains upbeat about achieving an annual growth rate of over 7%. He's also ruled out adjustments to the FY23 borrowing target, adding that the government will achieve its fiscal target this year. Lata joins us now with the GDP data and why the numbers did not meet expectations. Lata, lower than our poll and lower than the street's expectations as well. Take us through the good, bad and the ugly of the GDP data.
Well, first the numbers, GDP first quarter number came in at 13.5%. The CNBC-TV18 poll or the street estimate was between 15 and 15.5%. And the Reserve Bank's projection was 16.2. So it's lower than all that. Now, if you adjust this number to the Reserve Bank's projections, then the Reserve Bank's full year forecast falls from 7.2% arithmetically to 6.7%. Now, let me just explain why this 13.5 is a bad number. At the outset, 13.5 GDP growth over 20% last year looks good. I'll tell you why it's weak. If you take the actual Q1 GDP, it is 36.85 lakh crore. And this is only 3.8% higher than 3 years ago GDP of FY20. That's a poor record of growth.
Well, thanks very much for explaining and putting that number into context, Lata. But as we mentioned, multiple brokerages now have revised their full-year growth outlook on the back of the Q1 GDP print. To start with, Moody's has cut its growth estimate from 8.8% earlier to 7.7%. Nomura, Citi, JP Morgan and a few others have also trimmed their outlook. So, Lata, is the 7% growth target for the full year now at risk?
Many brokerages have cut their full-year estimates. Mostly to around 7 or below 7. Citi is the most important. They have cut their real GDP number to 6.7. They were standing at 8, so that's a huge cut. JP Morgan has merely said that they are standing at around 7%. So it's not above 7. Morgan Stanley has cut it from 7.6 where they were to 7.2. So a 40 basis point cut. And CLSA was sitting at 6.7. They've upped it to 6.8%. But the short point is there is a very good possibility India will not get to 7% growth this year. It may be a 6 handle, maybe 6.8, 6.9.
Lata, many thanks for joining us. Now, August sales numbers for the auto companies indicate a mixed bag so far. While domestic sales have shown strength, exports are under pressure in the last month. India's leading car maker Maruti Suzuki has seen a 27% rise in sales compared to August of 2020 on the back of strong growth in domestic sales. Bajaj Auto has seen an 8% year-on-year growth in sales in August. Exports, though, are down by 28%. The company attributed the decline in exports to the slide in retail sales in Nigeria. Now, the government's tax revenue kitty has grown by 25% in the April to July period as compared to the same period last year. All categories, including corporate tax, personal income tax and, of course, GST collections have seen buoyancy. Timsy Jaipuria is here with the numbers. Timsy, sharp rise in collections across the board, and that bodes well for the government.
Well, when you see that robust tax collections, they have been giving confidence to the government that the economy is slowly coming back on track. Rather, the view presented by IMF that India could be the fastest growing economy this year and next year gets seconded by the buoyant tax collections. Here's a look at our tax revenue kitty, how it looks like. If we look at the jump in tax revenues, we see that during the period of April till July this year, we've seen a growth of 25%, which has been built by both healthy direct and indirect tax collections. Coming first under direct taxes, corporate tax data during April till July this fiscal has shown a growth of 35%. On the other hand, the window of personal income tax has also seen a healthy growth of about 50% during April to July this fiscal. Indirect tax collections have also grown, reflecting that consumption is back in the economy. Though critics say that inflation too could be a reason for the extraordinary indirect tax collection growth, but GST collections are reflecting a healthy trend, and that's what the government is seeing. Remaining again above the 1.40 lakh crore mark of when we see the breakup of the monthly tax collections of GST, they give confidence to the government and the economists. So if we see the monthly figures, GST collections grew by 20% in April, followed by 44% in May, 56% in June, 28% in July, and 28% again in August. Important will be to see how the government is able to sustain these growth levels in the remaining part of the fiscal.
All right, Timsy, many thanks for joining us. And that is perhaps why the Finance Secretary, T.V. Somanathan, believes that we don't need to temper the borrowing calendar at this point in time. We don't need to intervene at this point in time, even though growth has been below expectations. Credit Suisse raises its FY23 earnings outlook for 7 large Indian banks, citing higher net interest margins and lower credit costs. The rating agency has raised SBI's EPS forecast, that is, by 15%, followed by 13% for ICICI Bank. Prime Minister Modi-led Cabinet Committee on Security has approved the development of a more capable and powerful variant of the Tejas light combat aircraft. Tejas Mark II will be developed at the cost of over 6,500 crores, much higher than the earlier sanctioned amount of 2,500 crores. The cost will cover prototypes, flight testing and certification. Tejas Mark II will have a longer combat range and greater capacity to carry weapons. The DRDO and the Aeronautical Development Agency plan to start production by 2030. INS Vikrant, India's first home-built aircraft carrier, will be commissioned by Prime Minister Modi in Kochi tomorrow. INS Vikrant, which took 17 years to be constructed, is the largest warship manufactured in India's maritime history. It will be able to accommodate a crew of around 1,600 and operate a fleet of 30 aircraft, including fighter jet and helicopters. The Sony-Zee Entertainment merger deal could hit a roadblock. As per a report, the Competition Commission is in its initial review, saying that the merger could hurt competition by having unparalleled bargaining power. Remember, the merger is expected to create a $10 billion TV enterprise. Now, responding to the Reuters report, Zee said that market share of the two companies has fallen in key markets and that the Competition Commission's questions are procedural and the dialogue is ongoing. The National Payments Corporation of India is in talks to acquire close to 10% stake in ONDC, the government's upcoming e-commerce network. But NPCI is not alone. NSDL and Bank of India have also shown interest in picking up a stake in the network. Ritu joins us now with more. Ritu, take us through what you are hearing on this front.
That's right. We understand that the Open Network for Digital Commerce, or the government-run ONDC, is in talks with 3 potential suitors to come on board as investors, taking the total number of investors that ONDC would have to 20. These 3 investors, we understand, are the National Payment Corporation of India and Bank of India, as well as NSDL, each of which are looking to invest as much as 10 crores each in ONDC. Now, we're given to understand that NPCI has already secured approvals from the Reserve Bank of India and the Ministry of Finance for this investment, and Bank of India and NSDL are also in advanced stages of closing this transaction, which is expected to be announced very soon. Once this fundraising is completed, in total from the 20 investors, including the 17 existing investors, ONDC would have raised about 190 crore rupees, which will primarily be used in some of its operational expenses. It already has marquee investors like, key public and private sector banks from ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank, State Bank of India, PNB, and so on its board, and 3 new investors are expected to be added very soon.
Ritu, many thanks. Now, shares of auto major Ashok Leyland hit a 52-week high today, rising more than 5%. This after the company bagged a mega order from the UAE. It has received an order to supply 1,400 school buses. The total deal is worth $75 million. All products will be manufactured at the company's UAE assembly plant. Dettol maker Reckitt has said that Lakshman Narasimhan will be stepping down as the global CEO at the end of the month. The company said Narasimhan has decided for personal reasons to relocate back to the United States and has been approached for an opportunity that enables him to live there. Nicandro Durante will succeed him as the CEO in the interim. SpiceJet shares declined over 3% today. The CFO has quit the airline after it reported first quarter losses of nearly 800 crore rupees. The auditor of SpiceJet is also concerned about the airline's ability to stay afloat. Sonia Shenoy joins us now with the challenges facing the airline. Sonia.
Well, thanks a lot for that. So, troubled aviation company SpiceJet tumbled in trade today. In fact, the stock is down almost 40% in the last 1 year alone after the company reported steep losses in its financial statements. Now, after much delay, SpiceJet reported both Q4 and Q1 FY23 earnings, and it's not looking good. SpiceJet reported a loss of 1,721 crores in FY22, much higher than the sub-1,000 crore loss that they reported in the previous year. Even in the first quarter of the fiscal FY23, SpiceJet's losses escalated to 1,784 crores versus a loss of 485 crores in the previous quarter, that is in Q4 of FY22. Now, one of the big reasons for large losses is the steep rise in ATF prices. ATF prices more than doubled year on year and are up 40% quarter on quarter in Q1 itself. However, SpiceJet has seen escalating losses for the last few years without any respite. Let's just map the last 6 years for SpiceJet and look at that. The losses have risen from around 300 crores in FY19 all the way to 1,722 crores in FY22. Now, there are several problems plaguing SpiceJet. The company in August of 2022 delayed salaries for the second straight month. 2 more aircrafts, the Boeing 737s, have been deregistered by the DGCA, and the Chief Financial Officer Sanjeev Taneja resigned on 31st of August. Also, there are deep cracks appearing in the financial health of the company as well. The auditor says that the results that SpiceJet posted cast significant doubts about the company's ability to continue as a going concern. The current liabilities far exceed the current assets by 6,406 crores. And this brings us to the inability of the company to raise funds over the last few years, which is also a big uncertainty. SpiceJet, however, has said that it is shortly engaging with investment bankers for a potential raise of up to $200 million. Back to you.
All right, Sonia, many thanks for joining us. That's the latest as far as SpiceJet is concerned, announcing its numbers over the weekend after a big gap. On to a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. Sources tell us that the insurance regulator, the IRDAI, is likely to look at opening up insurance companies' distribution architecture further. It may allow individual agents to tie up with more than one insurer. Yash is standing by with more. Yash, what does this mean for insurance agents?
Well, Shireen, quite clearly the intention of the regulatory body has been to open up the distribution architecture. Very recently, IRDAI allowed corporate agents, those are banks, to tie up with 9 life, 9 general and 9 standalone health insurance companies. And now that opening up has moved to individual corporate agents, individual insurance agents. Essentially, the thought is to allow these agents to tie up with 3 life, 3 general and 3 standalone health insurance companies. Currently, individual agents are only allowed to tie up with one company in each category, that is life, general and standalone health, which means that they can sell policies or products of one company in each category. The thought, as I said, is to ensure that the tie-up happens at least with 3 players in each category. As far as the whole process itself is concerned, this particular proposal, if it goes through, if it has to go through, it will require a change in the Act itself, and hence it will require a parliamentary approval for the same. What we've been given to understand is that once there is a confirmation or an approval within the regulatory body, then a consultation paper, a draft paper will be released on the same before it goes to the parliament for its approval. As far as the whole process itself is concerned, it will have a negative impact when it comes to the largest life insurance company, that is LIC. LIC has more than 50% of the total agents which exist in the industry, and once this particular proposal goes through, it will become much easier for other private life insurance companies to sort of poach agents of LIC onto their side to sell their products, and that will essentially hurt LIC, since that is the biggest business strength for the life insurance behemoth.
All right, Yash, many thanks for joining us. We will head into a break, but up next, India's agrarian story is not just about hardship and distress. It's also a story of technology and modernization. A special report when we return. Delhi's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has won the trust vote in the Assembly. 58 MLAs voted in favour of the confidence vote. Kejriwal said that they had brought a confidence motion to prove that the BJP's Operation Lotus has backfired, as none of the AAP MLAs switched sides. The BJP meanwhile accusing Kejriwal of indulging in drama to divert people's attention from what they allege is the liquor scam. Bengaluru on high alert due to heavy rainfall that has led to waterlogging and flooding in areas. The city recorded over 300 millimetres of rainfall in August. The all-time record for rainfall in August was 387 millimetres reported in 1998. The Karnataka government estimated that the rain-related losses since June have crossed 7,000 crore rupees and has now written to the union government seeking assistance. India's agrarian story is not just one of distress and hardship. It is also a story of modernization and harnessing technology or adapting scientific theory to practical application. Jude Sunnett stopped by a farm in a district in Tamil Nadu that has gone digital and is reaping the benefits of its transformation. Take a look.
You can't miss the portable weather stations on this farm, standing tall to provide live climatic data. Not far away, a farmer uses an AI app to get the lowdown on the health of his crops. Nearby, a soil testing lab sees a technician analyzing samples to figure out the best spot to sow the next crop. We're at Hosur in Tamil Nadu, where Agritech startup Waycool is helping farmers use technology to get the best yield from the season's sowing. Waycool says its flagship platform, Outgrow, delivers pre-harvest tech innovations which improve yield and save costs. In the last couple of years, the company has taken the concept and implemented it at several farmlands in the south. Technological interventions at the pre-harvest stage have helped nearly 7,000 farmers do better business. But Waycool says that not only have farmer incomes improved by 5 to 30%, but the very fact that AI is used in directing farming processes means there's a huge saving involved at the time of cultivation. The results from tech transformations at farms like this one have caught the fancy of the farming community in the region.
The very fact that we are able to go from a 60 farmer pilot to a 7,000 plus farmer shows that there are benefits that the farmer is getting out of this platform, right? So the range of, depending on the crops that they are cultivating, the range of benefit that they are getting is between 5 and 30% in terms of improvement in income and about 10 to 20% in cost reduction.
From tomatoes, cabbage and carrots to guavas, papayas and spinach, these farmers have begun using Waycool's tech to plan entire planting seasons. From fertigation cycles to assessing microclimatic soil data and optimizing irrigation, Outgrow also helps farmers troubleshoot through an AI tool that helps detect crop diseases and recommends treatment protocols. The inputs from soil sensors and weather data help farmers understand and implement necessary cultivation practices backed by cold, hard data. The app comes in 5 languages, including Hindi.
Weight increase, sir.
Our total yield has increased. Crops that used to give us 1 ton of produce now give us 1.5 tons.
Earlier, our crops used to be irrigated without checks and controls. Now I get to know exactly how much water is needed for an entire day. This ends up saving me a whole lot of effort and investment.
Waycool hopes that the popularity of its AI-backed farming tool will grow and it will be able to replicate this success and acceptance across farmlands in South India. It is also working on constant updates to its technology and hopes to enlarge this footprint first across its existing base of 180,000 farmers and then beyond. In Hosur, Jude Sunnett.
And in international news, the Sri Lankan government has reached a preliminary agreement with the IMF for a loan of $2.9 billion. The loan agreement is subject to the approval by the IMF management and its executive board and is contingent on the Sri Lankan government implementing previously agreed measures. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, over 1,000 people have been killed and 33 million impacted in the country, which is witnessing its worst floods in decades. The country's climate minister has claimed that 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater. The UN has described the disaster as an unprecedented climate catastrophe, launched a $160 million donation appeal. Pakistan health officials reported an outbreak of waterborne diseases in several areas. The UN Human Rights Office has released a report minutes before its chief is set to leave office, highlighting that China's arbitrary and discriminatory detention of the Uyghurs and other Muslims in the country may constitute crimes against humanity. The 48-page report, however, did not use the term genocide. China slammed the report, calling it pure farce. Democrat Mary Peltola wins the Alaska congressional seat, which was held by the Republicans for close to 5 decades. The first Alaska native to be serving in the U.S. Congress, Peltola defeated Republican Sarah Palin, who once served as the governor of the state. Late Republican Don Young held the Alaska seat for 49 years before his death in March. And that is a significant win for the Democrats. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. Thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned to CNBC-TV18. The news continues on the other side.